How to be an artist. Step 13. What is success? With guest Derek Hunter. So, Derek Hunter, how's it going, man?
Brandon Dayton, it is great to be here and talk to you.
Good. Remind me, where are you actually living these days? I know it's somewhere California-ish, but
yeah,
that's just a big, vague blob to me.
So I am just north of Los Angeles,
Okay.
north of Burbank. So I work in Burbank. So I live, in the outskirts, in the more affordable, areas, which is not saying a lot because it's still pretty affordable. But yeah, so I live kind of up by Magic Mountain, the Six Flags park.
What type of a drive is that for you to get into work?
Brandon, you're going to love this. I take the train.
Yeah, there you go, man.
I also hate urban sprawl, but when we bought our house, that was like the only criteria I had. I'm like, it has to be close to a train station. Because I hate driving. Two, I hate the idea of just like needlessly contributing to an enormous carbon footprint. And I like drawing a lot, and my train time is a good time for me to just kind of have some me time. So I live 2 miles from a train station. I ride my bike, hop on, go to Burbank, hop off, and then it's like another 1.5 miles to work. So
yeah, man, I cannot even express my level of contempt I have for commuting. I hate anytime I'm in the car and I'm on the freeway.
I hate it.
Cursing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the exact same way. I literally drive I literally get behind the steering wheel of a car maybe 2 or 3 times a month.
Yeah. Yeah, we just had a new baby, and it necessitated, I was being so stubborn about it. We've got 3 kids now and my wife, obviously, and all we have is a old Hyundai Sonata.
Yeah.
And I was just I don't want to have to buy another car. I just hate the idea that I have to buy another car, but we had to buy another car, and we bought one, and it's great. It suits our family much better. It's a minivan.
Yeah.
But there's still this part of me that's just cursing the fact that I have to buy a car.
Well, I didn't want to either, but we still had 2 kids in car seats. Mm-hmm. So, no matter what we did, we could not fit 3 kids in the back seat of our Corolla. So I'm still driving that same Corolla that I had, 15 years ago in Salt Lake.
And how many kids do you have?
We have 3.
Just 3, okay.
Yeah, and I went and paid a doctor to destroy my balls, so... So 3, that's it. And some might say that's 1 too many. I'm not saying I say that. No, I would never say it's 1 too many.
This is our 3rd, and I'm personally kind of open to a 4th. It's all up to Annie right now.
Yeah.
So it's however much, because this pregnancy was actually really rough on her as far as, I think maybe because she was older, she was also working during it, but it was just it was a really, really intense pregnancy.
That's a geriatric pregnancy, wasn't it? Was it considered a geriatric?
It was considered advanced age pregnancy, even though she's 36. I guess that's...
Oh, so she's the same age as Rachel then.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that's a tough situation. The doctors want to make you feel bad for having... Well, maybe not in Utah, I guess. Maybe you're not guilty as much about having kids in those, quote, advanced years.
Okay. So maybe I mentioned this as we were talking before we started recording, but this is as good a time as any to make my pitch for having kids, because we were kind of talking about that.
Yeah. I love this.
Okay. And maybe I hope this isn't too philosophically involved. I have to go back 5 steps just to make this argument.
That's okay.
So let me think about this, make sure I can kind of get it together right. So there's kind of two components, I think, 2 assumptions that make me feel like I want to have children, or I feel like it's okay to have children. And I mean, there's this kind of thing you mentioned was okay, in a world like this, why would you want to have kids? Which I think is very understandable. There's clearly there's a lot of scary stuff going on. And I've never in my life have I actually viscerally been so concerned about the future of the planet and the world than I have like this year, like legitimately, which I'm sure it's not hard. I'm sure it's not hard to understand, but kind of the two assumptions, one is a bigger philosophical one and one is more like a personal one. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to start with the personal one because I think the personal one is the one that matters the most. So a little bit of my history, and this is going to be a little bit redundant for people listening to the podcast, so my apologies, but it's going to be necessary rather than referring you to someplace else. So I mean, I've just had like depression, most of my life. I'm sure that's probably not too unusual with many artists.
No, I'm on low and I know how that is.
Okay. Yeah. That's something else maybe we can get into. That's kind of tends to be a theme in this podcast, is talking a lot about depression in art. So, but so I was depressed for a lot of my life. And during a lot of that period, my life kind of felt like, I don't know, not that I was ever suicidal, but there's kind of me doing this weighing thing. And where I'm like, is this really worth it?
Yep.
For how miserable, even with how wonderful my family is, my children, everything, how good my life is, there's this part of me, whatever, it's a chemical imbalance, whatever, that's just like, I don't know if this balances out in the end. Yeah. Like in the end, is life worth it? Is it worth living? And so the first big change for me came, I've just gotten much more seriously into doing meditation over the last few years. And I had an experience in a retreat that to make a long story short, just like changed that balance for me, where it was now like, okay, it's worth it now, And so that's part of it, is like, I'm now living my life where it's mostly like, yes, this is, even knowing that someday I'm going to die and that there's risks of all horrible things that can happen. Like life feels like worth living. So there's part of me that's like, okay, if it's worth it for me, like it's worth it for a new life. Like if I can have enough of a degree of confidence that like my child could have a good life, then it's kind of worth it. So that's kind of my first reason. And then my other reason is just like, okay, if we are already alive, and this is kind of the broader philosophical one, and this refers back to, there's this idea called the faith argument. And it's basically just like, there's no other, like the idea that we're going to destroy ourselves as humanity is just like an untenable idea. Like if anything we can do to prevent that from happening, we should do, because it would cause so much misery and suffering. And so there's part of me that's like, well, humanity destroying itself, I can't accept. And so if I can't accept that, then it's like, humanity should continue to exist and people should have babies. And what we have to do is we have to figure out all these problems that we have, we have to figure out how not to destroy ourselves and how not to be miserable. So I don't know. That's my long explanation about why I feel like I want to have kids again. So I don't know. How does that land on you?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, that is what always, that sort of mentality really is what keeps me from spiraling when thinking about just the kids I have now, or like when I have to remind myself, like, dude, don't like raise your kids with that like alarmist kind of like, now remember, when you get old, don't have kids. Like, I don't want to do that. So yeah, like really what I have to do is just reflect on like the quieter and peaceful moments in my life where I am not kind of like encumbered with these capitalist ideologies. Like, I got to work, I got to make a thing, I got to do it. Cause I just feel like and Rachel and I, my wife Rachel and I have been talking about this a lot lately, where we as people, especially right now, maybe more than any other point in history, are obsessed with escapism, whether it be TV or, going through our timeline on Twitter and Instagram, or, whatever that may be. We're sort of obsessed with avoiding living. And if we can remove ourselves from that cycle, whether it be distracting ourselves with projects and work that don't ultimately improve our day-to-day emotional well-being, then we're kind of like missing out on what I feel are the simple joys of life that do remind us why it's worth living. Because ultimately, like, creative pursuits, whether or not you get the kind of accolades or financial reward that you're looking for, are hollow because they don't really make our lives better. Like planting a garden, that makes your life better. Like you're with your family, you're weeding, you're tilling the earth, you're watching the life cycle happen in real time. And this is probably like pretty heady, and it's just like stuff we've really just been talking about over the last couple of days. So I haven't necessarily like zeroed in on like the definitive reason why this is occurring to me right now, which, you know, whatever. But I want to stop distracting myself. And I think when I can achieve that, it will be easier for me to see life worth living, focusing on the micro instead of the macro, where it's like, no, I can spend today with my child. I can spend this afternoon with my family doing something, and I don't have to worry about, am I missing an opportunity to be productive or to work on my comic or whatever it is. I don't know. Am I rambling? Does that make any sense?
No. I mean, I think I relate a lot to what you're saying. And I think there's honestly kind of like a zeitgeist along these lines of people kind of having a sense of like, there needs to be something else. Like we have to be focusing as a society on something else. And because I totally relate to what you're saying. And I mean, it's easy for both of us that have come from this like Mormon background to say like, oh yeah, here's this traditional Mormon thing is like productivity, right? Like getting stuff done, being productive. Yeah. You know, that's your self-worth is very much tied to what you can accomplish.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be willing to bet there's a much broader, you know, idea out there. Obviously within like capitalism, and it's like, we have this capitalist materialist way of looking at the world. And so we look at the world as these systems, and it's like, how productive can these systems be? How efficient can these systems be?
Yeah.
You know, thinking of ourselves as pieces within this system, you know, cogs within this system, you know, rather than human beings that have day-to-day experiences, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think it's interesting that you're thinking along those lines. And it's not even like, I kind of have this feeling that like, I don't even think capitalism necessarily, we need to like destroy it, but something needs to like take place of it, or I don't know, or even
it needs to be less
like we need to build something else on top.
I think it just needs to be less aggressive. I mean, it's, I think it goes hand in hand a lot with like, and I'm sure you've talked about this on your podcast, like the problems that you have with like the way our cities are planned and our communities are organized and stuff. It's just like everything is created to be consumed as much as possible with as little regard for how it affects the broader spectrum of, you know, sustainability or whatever. So it's like, you know, gosh, we can't just keep making stuff to make money, because I think that's just missing the mark. Like, make a shovel that lasts, please. Make a, like, you know, make things that are sustainable, whether that is something larger and broader, such as our communities. Like, why are we wasting so much room in our environments for roads? Like, cars are such a freaking waste. Like, can't we plan this better? Like, can we get rid of the old model and find a new way to do things? But we just get so stuck in these archaic models of operating things that don't work once you extrapolate and get bigger. but we still try to make these old systems work because it's what we're used to, even though they don't adequately service the larger communities that have grown around them, or the larger populations that have grown around them.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's like a lot of people have used this description that it's a bit of a Ponzi scheme. It works the same as a Ponzi scheme. That like as long as we can keep growing, it seems like everything's fine.
Yeah.
But we don't see that there's this cost that's building up underneath that we don't see. And at some point there's going to be some sort of reckoning with that cost, and there's all sorts of costs that are happening here, and I think one of the things that you're referencing, obviously there's like environmental stuff, and there's even like financial sustainability that we're not looking at. But then this like, I think there's also just this like spiritual cost that we're starting to see that just, we've both experienced that, I think, in our lives, kind of dealing with this stuff, and now trying to make a change, experiencing just the dissatisfaction of living in a world like this, and trying to find some sort of like happiness, through making stuff, through being productive or delivering or whatever. So I'm kind of interested. I want to kind of go back to, you're talking a little bit about, trying to find peace in being alive and the simple stuff, and gardening, which is another thing. It seems like obviously there's a lot of people returning to like gardening. And I think that's probably a really good place to start for trying to make things better. But I'm interested in, there's definitely, I get a sense from talking to you that there is this mindset that you have brought into art in the past that's been very much about like, I have to get a lot of stuff done. I have to finish things. I have to produce. Do you feel that is changing? Do you feel like there's an approach for you for making art that is an alternative to that you find, if not satisfying and maybe compelling to you?
Like, so let me backtrack and make sure I understand. So like the Derek that is the like 100% all cylinders going at once, just to like make shit for this, almost for the sake of making it, for lack of a better, way of putting it. But have I found a new perspective on what my goals are, as opposed to just making stuff? Is that what you mean?
Sure. It can be either goals or even the actual act. What do you expect the act of art and the experience of making art to be?
Oh, I mean,
it can be both those things though.
It's really hard because I have a very complicated, I think everyone has a complicated relationship with their work. I think my need to always be busy and always be like working full steam to make stuff. It's hard because sometimes I feel like I almost hate making art, but I get so depressed and so filled with self-loathing when I'm not making art. And I don't know where that comes from. And maybe that's something that I need to really sit down and like tackle. But I have a need to create that if I slow down or if I stop, I just shut down almost completely. And I just get super depressed. So even though sometimes creating makes me sad or depressed because what I create isn't fulfilling that emptiness that I have that I'm trying to fulfill, or it's not met with the kind of reaction that I'm hoping it gets met with. And then it's like, oh, I spent all that time for nothing. And, and I get caught up in that. Man, I'm losing my focus because I don't know that I know how to answer that question.
Yeah. Well, I think you touched on some things that I think seem pretty, seem to be a common pattern. As I've been having these discussions, it seems like depression and with making art kind of manifests in two ways. And it's like being like a workaholic, like working a ton, or and more in my case of just like it being very difficult to get started and hard to keep the momentum. And so that's more of my end of the coin. Is my end of the coin is here's the stuff I want to do, and I feel all this resistance to doing it. And just like having a day where I finish something is just like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I did it, actually finish something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like the feeling that I get when I finish something is only matched by the feeling that I get when I really hone in and nail what I want to make. So like the two times that I feel the most joy in the production of art is when I figure out what I want to say, and then when I finish saying it. And I think in my, it took me a long time to get to this point, but not until my early 30s did I really realize that it wasn't the act of making something that made me feel fulfilled, although I thought it was. It was making something that was worth making. So I think I was, I'm going to back.
Yes. Explain what that means.
I'm going to back up a little bit because I think this might be something that interests you as far as thematically. So in 2003, I was 23 years old and I just made like my first real effort at making a professional comic book. And I had a comic book series published by Slave Labor Graphics called Pirate Club. And they had picked up the series in like April of 2003. And then it didn't, or February even, I think. And it didn't end up coming out until the following February, the first issue. So I had drawn, I think, 6 issues before the first issue even came out. And I was just so gung-ho proud of this thing. I was proud of the concept. I was so excited about the characters and the story I was telling. And I was just sure that it was going to hit hard. I just was, I was overly confident. You know, I was 23. All my friends were stoners and alcoholics. And here was me like not going to the bar at night and not getting stupid high every weekend.
Were you still pretty like looped in with like the punk rock scene at that time?
Yeah. I mean, like I was in bands at the time and I was recording bands because that was kind of my hobby back then. I had like a little recording studio set up at my apartment or my house, and so I was just like really proud of myself for finding something that I could put all my energy into that spoke to me, and even though it was like rooted in youthful naivete and grandiosity that only, you know, those feelings that really happen for no apparent reason in your early 20s. I was super pumped and it came out, and I remember like I was at the Alternative Press Expo in San Francisco, and my publisher was gung-ho on it too. He was super pumped and excited, and it debuted at Alternative Press Expo, and my publisher kind of pulled me aside at one point. He's like, "Hey man, I don't really know how to tell you this, but Pirate Club really underperformed. We believed in it, so we actually double shipped the book. So for every 2 copies that a shop ordered, we gave them 2 more because we really believe in it. But the orders were much worse than we thought they were going to be, and I was crushed. I couldn't believe it. And to give a perspective on numbers that some of your listeners and you especially will understand, the first issue orders came in at I think 1,800 copies. So 1,800. That's like real low. To give you perspective, the Pretty Violent was 22,000.
Yeah, which that's a good opening.
It's a good opening for a nobody, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I without reservation or embarrassment, I can freely tell you that I like was inconsolable that night, and I definitely just like cried a lot. And I was out in San Francisco. We made a road trip of it with my friends Elias and Michelle, who I feel like you know Elias.
I know Elias.
So we made a road trip out of it, and we had a plan that night, I think, to go see my friend's band Dessa play in Fremont or something. But I'm just like, I can't go, you go. And my girlfriend at the time, who I'm now married to, she stayed behind and just like consoled me, and it was nice. It was like a real connecting moment, and that was kind of when I realized, like, okay, I need to marry this girl because she's showing me, like, I've never cried in front of a girlfriend before, and I was very young and embarrassed of my own emotions because toxic masculinity and all that bullshit. But basically, all of this to say, I took that as my cue from the comic book industry and from the general buying public that they don't give a shit about me or what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put on this armor, which is, I'm going to dive into my punk rock ethos, but as a shield, which is I'm not going to try hard anymore. I'm going to make these shitty comics that I can make fast and loose, and I'm never going to try to publish again. I'm just going to self-publish. I'm going to take my books to Kinko's, and I'm going to lean into the, hey, this is, whoops. And I'm going to lean into the whole, hey, DIY punk rock. I barely tried, but look how cool it is. I've got people, farting in other people's faces and, swimming in rivers of diarrhea. And I'm going to make it outrageous. But I was never trying because I was afraid of failing. So for 10 years, I spent constantly making things. I never stopped, but I stopped trying because I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of failing in the way that I felt I had failed when Pirate Club landed like a wet fart to the comic book industry. And while I don't want to punish my past self for that failing of, just acknowledging reality that not everything you do is going to be noticed, let alone appreciated or liked. Like, I'm not going to punish myself for that, but I missed a lot of opportunities for real artistic growth through trial and error. And so I did. I hid behind the veneer of self-publishing punk rock. Who gives a shit? I'm just making this for fun. And not until working on Pretty Violent, which I think 2000. Honestly, I think it was like the night after seeing The Force Awakens with my friends. Which I don't know why that precipitated it, because that movie didn't blow me away or anything, but it was just for whatever reason, I just saw it and I'm like, I just came home that night, and maybe it was the conversation afterwards or with friends or something, but I just realized, no, I need to try hard. I can't keep hiding behind just having fun making art. If I really want to get out of this whole endeavor what I want to get out of it, which is making something cool, making something that other people would feel is worth reading. Like, if I don't feel like it's worth spending time on, why should I expect anyone to spend their time consuming it or reading it or becoming actively engaged in it?
That's very interesting. So, I mean, because I've always seen you as someone that seemed like, obviously you're always staying very busy. But I that's not something that I detected that I mean, I can definitely see, like, in your improvement of your work over the last several years. So I don't know if that was part of that intent, but I never really picked up that there was a different kind of level of focus on Pretty Violent compared to some of the other past stuff.
And mostly it's in the writing and conceptual phase where I was just impatient and just wanting to get something made to satiate that need to be done with something, you know? And so I wouldn't spend the necessary time to like really think about like, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it? How can I make it connect with people? And, you know, that got me going down the rabbit hole of character and character motivations and how do you set up a unique character that allows for interesting things to happen because of their association with the world you've put them in and the characters you have them interact with, and how do their morals and ethics influence, how are they unique enough to influence a situation that will create the kind of drama or humor or whatever that you're hoping to achieve. So it was just, I just became more purposeful, and I'm way happier with the stuff that I'm doing. And I can kind of finally, after a long time, separate my self-worth from people's reaction to my work. Which
I was going to ask about that just quickly, like going back to Pirate Club. I mean, at that time, understandably, I remember the mindset I was probably had at that age. You know, you based a lot of the success of that on people's reactions to it. Do you think, I mean, maybe it would have been clouded quite a bit at that time by other things, but do you think that Pirate Club was something that you could have been proud of at that time, regardless of its marketing success? You know, had you had?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. But I didn't allow myself that grace, I guess. I just saw a failure. Like, I don't know why I expected everyone to like know to look out for it. It's like, it was my first thing with like one of the smallest comic book publishers in the game. For those who don't know, Slave Labor Graphics put out like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and Milk and Cheese and Lenore and, you know, a lot of Hot Topic type books. Not to say that disparagingly, but that's kind of the vibe of the publisher. I was very proud of it until it came out, which just says a lot about kind of what we were talking about earlier, which is like capitalism doesn't do us any favors for feeling good about things. I was just going to say, because it makes you see success as something other than I achieved the goal I was setting out to achieve, which is really all we should care about, especially at 23 when like I had a decent enough job. I didn't like need this to work for me to survive.
Especially when you're making art.
Yeah.
Part of it is is just kind of the stories we're told as kids. A lot of these stories are stories about success broadly, as far as like, you know, rags to riches type stories, but especially within art, we only ever get as kids like the stories of successes as artists. And by successes, I mean that very narrow financial success way of looking at art. So I think especially in my case, and it sounds like in your case, we just end up being totally unprepared for like the possibilities, you know? And it's like, there's a lot of parents that are wringing their hands when their kids say, I want to be an artist. And they're like, you want to be an artist? You know, what if it doesn't work out? And kids are like, no, I'm going to make it work. I'm going to be that one. I'm going to be that one that makes it work, you know? And it's not that the parents are right, even though they are kind of right. And the kids are kind of right. But like, we kind of need a culture that better prepares people for what it means to be an artist, and to be able to find like, to make your very best work, but also be able to find some satisfaction in just taking pride in your work, because the financial aspect of it and the financial success part of it, A, it's not guaranteed, but B, that can totally derail the like making good art.
Yeah.
You know, you can get so consumed by trying to make something. And that's some people are really good at striking that balance where they can make stuff that's like, okay, I'm really passionate about this, but I'm also going to be very smart about making something that's going to sell. I've always been horrible at that. Like anytime I try to do that, it's been a disaster. And the only time I've ever had success has just been like, I'm just going to make something that I'm really excited about and that I care about. And that stuff tends to do better.
And that's another thing that can get in your head too. Like the further you go in the industry, whatever, like if you're an artist, you are bound to become friends with people that are wildly successful. And you can't help but just kind of like think like, when's this going to happen for me? Like it happened for them.
Yeah, totally.
Or sometimes even worse, when they tell you that it will happen for you because it happened for them. Like, well, you're good.
Yeah, there's like survivorship bias.
Yeah, like
right?
yeah, exactly. And so for the longest time, I would look at my best friends in the industry and be like, all right, well, they're telling me my success is right around the corner, and they know success because they have it. And that's just gonna get you on wrong-headed tangents in your own goals.
Yep.
Because like I've changed.
Dude, that's such a good point. It's like, and I know exactly what you mean. You have friends that are very successful and some that are extremely successful, and you look at their lives and it seems so normal and ordinary. It's like putting on pants, you know? And you're like, oh, they're doing it. It's easy. It's just normal to be successful. And then you realize you try to do it and you're like, oh, it's I can't put on pants apparently.
Yeah, I think aside from like removing a sense of pride in your work from the financial and critical success of a project, I think also just acknowledging that luck is always going to factor into whether or not what you're doing becomes popular is really healthy. Because, I mean, like you said, you can't control whether something gets popular. All you can control is like how much work you put into it and how proud you are of it and how much you're trying to make it better than the last thing that you made. And honestly, since making like Pretty Violent came out with big numbers, like for me, like issue 1 came out with 22.
I would love to have numbers like that on a book. I did
22,000 is great for any creative like anybody would be happy with those numbers. But now I just got my numbers back for issue 8, I think. And I'm probably wrong, but I think they're at like 3,900. So that's like, guys, that's way lower. But I don't have that same relationship with my work anymore. So while I know it's probably time to wrap it up and move on to the next thing, I'm not depressed that people aren't reading it, or people read the first issue and thought like, not my thing. Or maybe on the second issue they thought that, or maybe on the third issue they thought that. Like, it doesn't bother me because I'm proud of it. And I get to make a comic book with my best friend. So it's like, I get to, me and Jason Young, who I think you talked to already.
Yep. Yeah, he's been on
so
there,
it's like, what do I give a shit? I get to joke around with Jason and like be really proud of something and make it the best that I can within the time constraints that I have. Like, I've definitely cut corners. I've definitely got pages that I look at and just be like, that's not my best effort. But I've got a family. I've got a full-time job that's very creatively demanding. Sometimes I can't put everything into it, but I'm putting exactly what I can, and I'm proud of it. So it doesn't matter.
I'm honestly, I cannot believe, I don't understand how you or other people like you are able to do that, to have a full-time job that's creatively demanding and then at night go home and do something like this. But I did want to ask you, have you read any of Jim Zub's articles on like financial models for comics?
I read one years ago. And
his stuff is worth revisiting. Sorry, I don't. I
was just gonna say he's always someone that I've very much enjoyed talking to in person as well. So I imagine that they're very well thought out and helpful. And I should go relook at those because I completely forgot about them. So
he did a really good one for Skull Chasers. Skull Crashers, Skull Kickers years ago, and he's since just constantly updated it with new like models explaining how finances are working for his different books. But I mean, what you described with Pretty Violent, he's kind of shown that that's happened with like every book that he's released, that there's this big, I mean, it's really about the first issue, you know, and then there's this big drop off, but then he shows like how over time, you know, there's these sales that continue. So you do this, and then there's things like trades.
And I'm basing my whole model off of that. Like, I remember that aspect of it. It's like, don't hyper focus on the success of the thing you're making right now, because if you believe in it and you like it and you're proud of it, then it can stay on your convention table forever. And then you make the next one.
There's going to be,
and then the people who never heard of your first project but like the next project, they will be like, oh, what's this other thing that I've never heard of? And then they go back and buy it, or they don't, whatever. But you can't get caught up in the here and now because you're building something.
Yeah, it's a long-term project, and it's like you're gonna probably continue to see. I mean, especially for something like you're doing that has a multi-issue thing, multi-volume. You know, something like I did with Green Monk, it's one trade, and it's there's probably not going to be much of a continuing life cycle on that. I just wanted to mention that really quickly, because I think that might be a pretty normal thing that you're describing as far as like how your sales have gone with the book, you know. But also, you still should just focus on, I think the way I was thinking about it as you were talking about it was that no one should ever be miserable making art. Like if your game plan involves you being miserable, then that's like a bad game plan, you know? And actually I spoke with, I had a conversation with Jess Smiley. Are you familiar with his stuff? Yeah. Just a great guy, like such a like really fun, like encouraging, positive guy. And he had said this thing that I thought was so cool, where he's like, when I'm planning a project, part of my plan is I always plan how I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm just like, oh man, that would have been so good to hear like 15 years ago, you know, because every single one of my plans has been, this is going to be miserable and I'm just going to suck it up and get through it until I finish it, you know? And that's bad news. You know, anyone that's going to go in with that position, not that there aren't times that are going to suck, but it better be mostly enjoyable. Otherwise it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? And that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, where it's like, when you try to make something that you think will be a success, it's probably not coming from an honest place, which means it's not going to hit those centers of your brain that make it fun. And I think everyone can see that. Like, you know, not that it's inauthentic necessarily. I mean, it's not like it's like, well, I'm going to make a romance comic because romance comics sell. I mean, like, not that level of inauthenticity, but just if it's not exactly what you want to do, I think it's going to shine through, and I think people can tell. And so you can't be chasing trends.
And there's a lot of little compromises that can happen, you know, along the way. It's not just like I need to do a totally different concept, but I pitched a book beginning of this year, and the main character in the book is a bounty hunter that specifically hunts down runaway slaves.
Oh boy.
And that's the core of the pitch, is that's the main character. And it's kind of, the story's kind of about his redemption, you know, about like, well, this person that's such a low point, has had so much trauma in his life that's their job. And it takes place in a fantasy world. So, you know, it's like, but everyone that I pitch it to is just like, it can't be about slaves. This main guy cannot be like a slave hunter. And I'm just like, this is what makes the story good, is that he's such a horrible person. You know, that's what like made me excited about the book, and I'm just like, I can't change that. That's the core of the book, is that, and I understand why that's controversial, but, well, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of an example of those like little compromises that are just like, yeah, that would take away from what's making me excited about this book.
Well, everyone, speaking of that exact thing, when I was planning Pretty Violent, I ran it by all of my successful friends in the industry. And they're like, dude, first of all, independent superhero books don't sell. Period. Like, yeah, I'll throw names out there because it matters to this. So name drop, get ready. But like, I showed it to Ryan Otley and Robert Kirkman, and they both, Invincible. That's about as big of an independent superhero book as exists. And they're like, it's an uphill battle, man. Like, people know they want Spider-Man and Batman. Independent superhero books don't sell. Yeah. Set it in a different world. Do something. But with Pretty Violent, it really, the story I wanted to tell relied on those archetypes and the reader's understanding of those archetypes and how they're built into our understanding of society and black and white and right and wrong. And I'm just like, it has to be a superhero book. So, I just thought like, okay, well, how do I make it stand out? And they were like, oh, also cartoony books don't sell in the direct market. Like, so good luck getting like comic book buyers to buy a book that looks like it's for kids. So it's like, Bing, all right, I'll make it super violent and I'll make it really bloody. Okay, but then parents are going to buy it for their kids and be pissed off because it's not what they think it is. It's like, all right, I'll name it something that says that.
It's very obvious.
The full title is Pretty Violent with lots of swears. All right.
Lots of swears.
So it's like, sometimes you have to listen to that feedback, but it doesn't mean you have to change anything inauthentically. It just means you have to figure out a way to make it work while still fitting into whatever expectations people have or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's you kind of need to be aware of what's going on in the world and aware of the issues. And sometimes you got to be kind of sneaky, but I always like to say that like, no one really knows. You can know what has sold in the past. You can never know what's going to sell in the future.
And I'm not saying their advice was bad. It's just like they had experience and were trying to help me avoid pitfalls that they'd seen other people fall into. And I appreciate it. And it gave me pause and made me think of a way I could approach it that might prove to be more successful. And I don't know if those are the reasons it worked or if it would have worked anyway, but it's never bad to lean on the experience of those who came before you, even if it means you're just ultimately going to ignore certain aspects of it.
At least you can have you can make an informed decision.
Sorry, Robert, you just are not successful enough for me to listen to.
Yeah. Well, he knows what works for him,
he does. And
he
liked it and everything. He wasn't trying to tell me not to do it. And same with Ryan. I think Ryan had more reservations, but that was more for me where it's like, hey man, I want you to be successful. You might think about not doing this or whatever. So,
yeah. That's interesting. So I'm kind of interested. I want to go back because this is so alien to me, or because I have failed so abysmally at this in the past. I'm interested in how you find the balance between working a full-time job and you can remind us where, like, what you're doing specifically right now, and then how you fit in all this other work too. You fit in Pretty Violent on the side. You're creating a monthly book on the side.
it really helps to have a spouse who also is a scatterbrained artist.
A big part of the equation,
because
right
Rachel
there.
knows what it's like to need to like disappear and kind of have time to yourself to like get into the headspace you need to make something and then to make something. But also, I have over the years, I've always made comics and juggled a full-time job. And because I've always had that feeling of like, I need to rush to get it out the door because I need to feel those feels. So over the last like 20 plus years, I've been developing a style that allows me to do that, which means draw quickly. My style is loose. It's sloppy. I've leaned into the weird shapes that come out of my hand naturally.
Dude, and you've developed a very appealing style by doing that. So like it's worked in that regard.
I mean, it does rub a lot of people the wrong way, but I have found that balance of commercial, at least like commercial sustainability. Whether or not it appeals to everyone, it's still kind of like it has a polish necessary to be seen as viable at the very least. But I draw quickly. I used to work late into the night so that I would not miss out on helping Rachel with the kids and stuff. As I've gotten older, I just feel like I'm not as creative at night. My energy was spent at my day job, and which is, by the way, I'm a designer in animation. I, as you know, lived in Salt Lake City for a number of years, and we hung out very regularly. Yep. And then I got a job working on Adventure Time as a designer, so I moved out to LA. Worked on Adventure Time for like 4 or 5 years, and then moved over to Nickelodeon for a short spell to work on a show there, and then over to Disney where I was a background designer on Ducktales, and now I'm at Netflix working on Kid Cosmic, which is the Craig McCracken's new show. He's the guy that created Powerpuff Girls.
Oh, cool.
So that's what I'm doing, and learning to draw fast obviously allowed me to kind of like fit in that drawing time necessary to draw my comics in some kind of like a semi monthly capacity, or at least a steady capacity.
Yeah. But you don't stay up late to do that. I mean, is it like after the kids go to bed, or do you kind of do something where it's...
So it was, after the kids go to bed. So I'd get them into bed, and then I'd start work, and then I'd hang out with Rachel for a bit. And around 9:00, I would start work, and I would work from like 9 to 11 or 9 to 1, you know. But I just gotten faster and faster at drawing. And again, leaning into those natural shapes that my hands make, I grew in confidence. I grew in my ability to like go even faster because I was trusting myself more and finding my way out of these little traps that my natural drawing abilities or inabilities, however you want to look at them, put me into. But that also made me faster at my day job. So now at this point, and should I say this out loud? Yeah, sure, I'll say it.
I think I know where this is going.
I can do a full day's work in about 4 hours.
Sure.
So I get the kids up because Rachel she needs more sleep than I do. So I get up with the kids, get them off to school, and then at around 7:45, 8:00, which by then Rachel's awake. I'm not saying she doesn't wake up and get the kids off to school, but like I'll wake up and kind of like get things going and get breakfast going. And then she drives our middle son, who has special needs, to his school. And then my daughter is old enough, she rides her bike to school. But so I start working from like at like 8:00, and then I work till about 10, at which point I get on my bike and go to work, get there around 11. And then I'm...
Oh, so you'll work on pretty violent
in the morning. Yeah. And then I'll work. And then I've got my train ride, which is like a half hour, and I draw on the train. And then I get to work, and I work till like 5. So I get there at like 11, and work, and then lunch, and and then get home around 6 or 7, and then, hang out with the family. And then after they go to bed, maybe I'll work on the comic at night. Most of the time I don't, because I've realized the necessity of recharging so that I don't experience burnout. And then Rachel allows me to, and I say allows me, not like I need permission, but like we're a team. We need to be on the same page and communicate our needs as far as like how we need to help each other achieve our goals, and whether that's the house or the family or whatever. Rachel's really good about allowing me like 2 to 4 hours on Saturday and Sunday to work on the comics. So all told, I'll work on the comics 10 to 20 hours a week. And I do about 3 pages a week on the comic. That's my output.
Wow. That's good.
So
man.
It's balancing, but it's also just getting faster and learning to trust yourself so that you can do that.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's cool to see that development. And I think that speaks a lot to like I was talking with my daughter about this. She's starting to get really into art, and she's obviously this whole question of style. Like, how do I get a style that I like? It's something that an experienced artist always asks. And just the thing you said that I thought was really cool is like, you've leaned into the shapes that your hand wants to make, and how much style and finding your artistic path sometimes can be about just getting out of your own way and letting your body and your mind kind of just do the stuff it feels comfortable doing.
It took me way too long to figure that out. Like I think I spent from like 2006, 2007 until about 2013, 14, figuring out how do I draw more commercially. And I was fighting the whole time. It was an uphill battle for every drawing that I made in that time, because it wasn't coming from me. It wasn't natural. I wasn't expressing myself. I was trying to express someone else through my brain, and it just wasn't working. And I'm glad I finally realized like that's a waste of my time. And Pretty Violent came as a result of basically going back to the way I drew when I was in my early 20s, but with the more refined and learned, I guess. But I'm using those same shapes I did in Pirate Club and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you've spoken about how it's interesting that there's this balance between you finding places where you're putting in less effort, but at the same time, there's these other places where you are putting in effort, So it isn't just about like path of least resistance. It's very much about like, find the places where you want, it's worthwhile to put the effort, and find the places where you don't need to,
and you can let that's helped me a lot. But really, it's sometimes you think you want to do something and you really don't. So there's a lot of people that, all my friends are like, oh man, I wish I had time to draw a comic. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Like I have your same job. We work at the same place doing the same thing. You have 0 kids. I have 3. And it's just like, there's no shame in admitting I want to do this, but not enough to sacrifice other things.
Do it.
And that's okay. Like if you need to wind down by playing Destiny with your friends, dude, that's fucking fine. But I get anxious when I play video games because I'm like, oh, I could be making comics.
Yeah.
So I think some people,
not good
some
for
people
me.
just want to say they've done something. And we all do that. I wish I could play lead guitar, but I'm not willing to put in the effort to get good at it. So I'm just a shitty punk rock guitarist instead. And that's okay.
Dude, nothing wrong with a couple of good bar chords in your pocket. You can have a lot of fun with some bar chords. So
like not making a comic doesn't mean like I'm special. It just means you are not prioritizing making a comic in the same way that I am. And that doesn't mean I'm not saying I'm better than anybody because of that. We all just we all need different things to feel fulfilled in life. And we prioritize our time accordingly.
It's like my dad used to say. It's one of these really trite phrases he used to say that would drive us nuts, but he would say, like, we do the things in life we really want to do. That's one of my dad's sayings. It's like, I guess it's kind of true. But I think part of it too is, you kind of touched on this, that there's so much ego that gets into the things we do, and ego can only carry you so far. If your only reason to do something is because you think it'll make you look cool, like, that gas is going to run out on that pretty fast.
Yeah. And by the way,
like, if you want to,
I just realized the specific examples I gave are such a fucking subtweet to like specific people. So if they listen to this, they're like, fuck you, Derek. I know you're talking about me. Sorry, guys. It was the first example that came into my mind. I love you.
Yeah, it can't help it. It happens. It happens all the time. So I'm interested. So that's work. You don't have to go too long into it, but so I am interested in how you find, in the time you have outside of drawing stuff, like, how do you recharge? Like, how do you engage as a father, all that stuff? Like, how do you think about life when you're not drawing?
That's probably my biggest, fault or failing as a human. I think maybe not as a human, but maybe as a parent, I'm good about engaging my kids, but it's always an effort. Mm-hmm. It's always something I have to like actively say, like, hey, Derek, you've been doing X for long enough. Go play with your kids. Which, maybe like, I don't know. I do stuff with my kids a lot. But maybe it comes from like a sense of responsibility more than it comes from just like an innate desire to like goof around and have fun. And like my recharging is just like doing different things. Like, I make toys. So it's still like doing something goal oriented. Like, I'm always doing something.
You're one of these people that takes a break from art by making more
but
art.
I had to find an art that I couldn't monetize because I'm not good at what I do. So it's like I am getting what I need out of it because it doesn't feel like a second job. But I ride my bike to and from work when I'm like, not the train part, but the getting to the train. I enjoy riding my bike. I don't do a lot of stuff to like just kind of recharge, and I know I need to be better about it because it can catch up to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's probably a pretty common thing for people to feel a little bit like, engaging with my kids is kind of hard, because I have that same experience. I've had the experience so much where it's like, I should play with my kids, and I play with my kids for about 20 minutes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so boring.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks coming to that realization.
Sometimes it's not fun, but I have also found, and so let me give you an example. Like, I did for Easter, I gave the kids like these coupons. They're like quality time coupons where it's like, okay, I'll do a drawing machine where I draw something for you. Like, one is like, oh, we'll do a toy war. My son really likes doing these toy wars, and doing the toy wars is so boring. Like, I've tried to get into it, and it's just, but I have found other things that I really enjoy doing with my kids. Like, I found like my son, like, all he ever wants to do is play video games, and it drives me nuts. And I found like he loves going hiking. And so I've been able to do that with him, where it's like, let's go on a hike. And I can go in his room 6 a.m. I'm like, we're going hiking, and he'll pop out of bed.
Awesome.
I'm like, go hiking. And it's like, it's like one of these, it's like this, and you know how it is too, that as kids age, they become different people, and you can share different things with them. And it's like, oh, now we can start watching these cool 80s movies that I couldn't watch with them when they were younger. We can start reading the same books.
And honestly, I'm way more interested in like that. Like, my daughter is so much more fun to hang out with than my sons, but it's just because she's my oldest child, and we can communicate on something other than just my dad plays with me level. Like, we can talk about things. Sure. Like, right now I'm teaching her how to play guitar, and that's something that we're doing together that's fun. And she likes writing stories, so she reads me her stories and says, Dad, I don't know how to get from this part to this part. So yeah, I mean, it is finding what you like to do with your kids, and sometimes that's harder with the younger ones. And I do enjoy, like, once I get to doing things with my kids, I enjoy it. But I'd rather be making art. I'd rather be like in my own head, and that's probably a failing on my end, where it's like, what's so great about inside your head that you're not getting from your kids? And whatever, I don't know, but I'm working on that.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe that's just being honest. Do you ever fantasize about like making art with your kids, like collaborate, like at some point if your daughter's, when she's old enough and skilled enough to be like, yeah, let's make something together?
Oh, for sure. She actually did do a 3-page comic in Pretty Violent #5.
Oh, I think I remember
awesome.
This. Yeah.
She wrote it and drew it, and I helped her with layouts so that, because she doesn't know how panels and stuff work. So I kind of like laid out the panels for her, and then she drew whatever. But it was cool. It was cool doing that. And I would like to do something like that in the future. Like sometimes we make movies, my kids and I, like,
that's cool.
We'll just spend an afternoon just kind of like drawing up props and making props. And then we figure out where we're going to go shoot it and I mean, this is all my kids. Like, I'm not writing this stuff. I'm just kind of like facilitating it. But then we make a movie, and then we come home, and Rachel plays with them while I edit it and put music to it. And so that's really fun. But kids have such short attention spans that you really can't spend more than like 2 hours total on the whole.
You can't be like cussing at them while you're trying to get the shot right.
Yeah, and if you're doing that, man,
like, no, you're missing you're missing your line. Come into this cue. You're missing
the whole point of the thing. So they're all shitty, but it's fun, and it's a good way to get everyone involved. And yeah, making art with your kids is great as long as it's on their terms. Like, you can't force them to like be at your level creatively, motivationally, or whatever.
Yeah, that's cool. Sometimes I have those moments of inspiration where I'm just like, oh, here's this project we're going to do. Like, hey kids, let's build this thing. We're going to build this thing. And the kids are like, oh, it sounds amazing.
You end up finishing it after 20 minutes.
And you finish it. Yeah.
That happens. But guess what? They're still going to have the memory of probably spending all day doing it. So win-win.
Yeah, not bad. So anyway, man, probably should wrap it up now. I've got to go attend to my own children too. But hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out. I thought the conversation was a lot of fun. It always goes, we talked about like, hey, here's some things we can talk about. And we went in a totally different direction, which is totally cool. I was
going to say, did you want to touch on anything quickly before we go? But
I can't even remember the stuff that we talked about before we started.
Yeah, I know. But no, I totally like talking to you, Brandon, because even when we talk about art, it's never on a superficial level. I like that you like to get to the bottom of, why people do the things they do and how, what perspective they have on things. So it's fun, man. It's always fun talking to you.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Last thing I would say is, I mean, I think you're kind of like the phantom of Draw Night. So it's been years since you've been there, but like your presence is always, you could like walk through the door and I'm going to be like,
of course he's here. Yeah. It's been 8 years.
Yeah, of course he's here.
It's been so long,
but you belong.
Yeah. I'll come back. I plan on coming back. I'm going to buy a house next to you because, that's where I can afford one.
I don't know. Maybe not anymore, but maybe compared to California though, you probably still be able to. So yeah, please do. We'd love to have you as a neighbor.
I like that area, by the way.
Oh yeah. It's awesome. Best part of Salt Lake.
I do like it. I do.
All right. Thanks, man.
Good talking to you.
You've been listening to How to Be an Artist. To support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/H2BNA.